Thank you very much. On behalf of the mayor, I want to extend our appreciations to the first responders, police, and fire. Early this morning, we're extremely grateful to them. And I want to extend to the families of those people that were injured and are in hospital the concern we share for their loved ones. I just spoke with the mayor, who, as you know, is out of the country at the moment. He spoke with the families of particularly of the two people that were listed in critical and serious condition, and he's been told by the family members that they've been told that their loved ones appear that they will make it. So that is good news from the loved ones of the two people in the hospital in critical and serious condition. Thank you.
I want to start off by reiterating what the council members said by expressing my thoughts and prayers to the victims in this morning's shooting. I also want to commend the officers with the Houston Police Department, Bel Air, West University, and Southsides, as well as the paramedics from the Houston Fire Department. They all responded quickly, they assessed the situation, and they began immediately working toward containing the threat and treating the victims. And this included having two officers from outside agency who escorted a shooting victim to waiting paramedics while the suspect was actively shooting at the officers around them. HPD, of course, is the lead agency in this case. However, we are also working closely with the FBI and ATF. I've also been in continuous contact with Mayor Turner, who is traveling on city business, and I am joined today by Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Cohen, who is representing him. And before we open it up to questions, and we have all the subject matter experts here who can answer those questions, I would like HPD Homicide Captain Dwayne Reddy to brief you a little bit more on what we have in regards to this incident.
Thank you, Chief. Give you some quick information, then we'll open it up. I can tell you that at approximately 6:30 this morning, several calls originated at both the Bel Air and Houston Police Department 911 centers. The initial report to Houston Police Department was that we had a shooting that had just occurred. Shortly after that, and within a few minutes, that call was changed to an active shooter while members from the Bel Air Police Department, West University Police Department, and Houston Police Department responded to the scene. At this time, I can tell you that multiple officers engaged the suspect who was shooting randomly at passerbys, as well as anybody he could put his sights on. Altogether, we had 5 HPD officers at Houston, 3 Bel Air officers, and 1 West University police officer discharged their weapon at the suspect in the ensuing exchange of gunfire. Shortly after their arrival, the officers from all agencies were confronted with several critical tasks. The first and foremost being protecting the citizens. And they had to tend to injured citizens who were in the line of fire, while at the same time engaging the active shooter and also blocking the streets to prevent other people from entering the scene and causing future or additional harm or injuries. Lastly, they were making sure that the suspect did not get away to cause any more harm or injury himself. I also want to let everybody know that although this scene is still being processed, we have identified, marked, or secured nearly 100 pieces of evidence. We have identified nearly 75 spent shell casings, fired rounds. That's going to include both the suspect as well as the officers who exchanged gunfire. We do have some damage downrange that we'll have to examine, that being cars and vehicles or houses that have evidence in them from the gunfire. And the suspect had 2 weapons on him at the time, either on his person or in his car that he was standing nearby at the time of this incident. One of them is a .45 semi-automatic handgun. The other one is a .45 semi-automatic Thompson carbine, commonly known as a Tommy gun. It's also a .45 round. Also at the scene was nearly 2,600 rounds of live ammunition. The scene is still being processed. As the chief said, Houston Police Department is lead in conjunction with the District Attorney's Office. And what I'd like to do before we open it up for questions is appeal to the citizenry. If there's anybody out there that saw something, heard something, maybe videotaped something with their cell phone, or has any information about this scene and you have not talked to a homicide investigator yet, please call us at 713-308-3600. 3600 because we would like to talk to you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for some questions. I'll take this one here.
Do we think this guy acted alone, or are you still looking for possible other people who may have known about this?
Right. At this point, we believe he acted alone, but like I said, we're still processing where he lived. We're processing further evidence, so we won't close the door on anything. But right now, we believe he acted alone.
What's your best guess on motive at this point?
I'm sorry, my best guess on what?
On motive, please.
We have nothing to offer you with regards to motive. That part's still under investigation.
Can you tell us about what he was wearing and if you found like Nazi paraphernalia in his vehicle?
He was wearing military-style apparel. I don't know exactly what nationality, what army, or anything like that. We did find some old Nazi emblems about some of his not merchandise, but his personal effects. And I understand there are also some where he lived. To what extent that played, I don't know, because there's also other, what I would refer to as historic or vintage military stuff within the apartment going back to the Civil War.
Is there surveillance video of this guy or any of the shooting victims, fleeing the scene? Anything like that?
We do have some video, some of it from the body-worn cameras with the officers involved. My understanding is we have some citizens that have come forward with some stuff on their cell phones. I'm making an appeal. If there's anything else out there that has not been brought to our attention, please bring that to our attention. And, of course, the investigators will do their normal canvass of the area, looking for any third-party cameras that might have been affixed to, the nearby apartments or anywhere else for, businesses, yeah.
Captain, can you confirm the name that's been reported in several local media outlets, Nathan Desai? I'm not sure how.
Yeah, let me talk about that for a second. I'm not going to confirm anything at this point. Let me tell you why. We have our procedures and protocols in the Houston Police Department, and that involves working with the medical examiner's office. We need to work with them to, one, make the necessary identification to confirm it, and two, make the necessary notifications to next of kin. I know y'all have your independent resources, and we believe we know who this person is, but until we comply with those procedures, we won't be confirming or talking about the suspect at this time.
Some residents of the area said he was known to be a violent man who had actually made threats. Can you confirm that?
No, I can't, but we'd be more than happy to talk to them.
And what's interesting to note is we did look at the
Go ahead,
cost
Chief.
for services for that location, and we can find no nexus to his apartment, the individual we're looking at, or to that name or to that apartment.
No calls for services?
None with a nexus to that name or to that apartment.
Do you think he was targeting anybody specifically, or just shooting randomly?
The information we have is that it was random.
Back to the Nazi paraphernalia and things, do we think that this somehow played a part in the shooting, or do we think that he was just a collector of things?
We're at this point, we're very open-minded in terms of what the motive, and that's why we have, as our partner, the FBI, is involved with this investigation as well.
Can you tell us anything about this lawyer? Was he on medication? Any drugs? Anything more about this guy? Anything that was found in his condo, with his car, beyond the rounds, beyond the military style?
Listen, I just went over the fact that we're not even here to confirm his ID, so talking about his personal history, any particulars about him, that won't be discussed at this meeting. I don't want to talk about what we think. I'd rather talk about what we know.
Can you say how many cars did he end up hitting? You said he was shooting randomly, but have you all had a tally as to how many vehicles he hit?
No, I will tell you it's several at this point, but like I said earlier, we have some downrange damage that we need to examine, so there may be other cars out there. We've got the crime scene units out there canvassing the area along with the homicide detective. So when I say this is still an open and active investigation, the information we're providing is subject to change with the more we come to know.
Did he leave any notes or any letters that you guys found?
Nothing that I can speak about at this time.
Can you
Go ahead.
tell us what was significant that you found inside his condominium or inside his vehicle?
I'm not prepared to talk about anything in the apartment or where he lived at this time because that part is still being processed.
Can you give us any more insight as to the actual timeline when the police engaged the shooter, when they successfully neutralized him?
I can tell you the call came in right around 6:30. Within 10 or 15 minutes, members from both the Bel Air Police Department as well as the Houston Police Department were on scene. I don't know if that means the dispatcher put them as arrived or they put themselves as arrived, but I know what they were confronted with as soon as they got there.
And did all shootings take place on Law Street?
At this point, all the shootings that we're aware of took place there, but some of the complainants or victims drove elsewhere before they were able to seek medical attention.
Did he legally own both guns?
Why don't I call ATF forward to talk about the firearms? You're talking about the suspect's firearms, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What was your question? Did he legally own both guns?
Yes, both weapons were purchased legally. One was purchased in 2009, the other was purchased in 2011 by the deceased.
Can you tell us which one? Which 2009?
2009 was a rifle, and the handgun was purchased in 2011.
Here in Houston.
One was purchased in Houston, one was purchased in College Station.
At an actual store?
Yes.
And can you tell us which gun was where? Which one was on the person, which was in the car?
The handgun was near the body, and the carbine was inside the vehicle.
Did he go back to his vehicle to...
He really never left the location of his vehicle. Both him, the vehicle, and the tree he used as cover were all right there in the same spot.
So is the belief then that he was reloading at that location?
It's possible. We won't know until we do an exhaustive examination of the fired shell casings and his weapons. That part's not been completed yet, but with the number of rounds that he had available to him, I'm sure that might have been the intent.
So was he discharging from his vehicle or standing outside?
He was standing outside at the time.
Did he ever have any dialogue or conversation with any of the officers?
No, he did not.
Anything found on social media? I know you're not, but we often see these threats that are premeditated, or someone says they're going to blow up a school or whatever. Anything that...
Yeah, anything with a nexus in that regard, both with the suspect or that's tenuously connected, we'll make that part of the investigation. Nothing we're prepared to talk about at this time.
What can you tell us about the victims and how many people were injured and how they're feeling right now?
Dr. Percy?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So there were a total of 9 people who had injuries, 3 of whom, and I'll start with the least critical and move my web. So the 3 of them felt that they had got something in their eye, but they were not shot. They were treated and released at the scene and either went to their own doctors or went to a hospital on their own. 3 were transported to Memorial Hermann Southwest. They have all been treated, released, discharged home, and they're in good condition. There are 2 that remain admitted to Memorial Hermann to the Red Duke Trauma Center. 1 is in critical condition. 1 is in good condition. And there is 1 patient who was transported to Ben Taub Hospital who remains in serious condition at this time. But as the council member pointed out, we have high hopes that all those folks are going to survive their injuries.
Can you talk about what those injuries are, Mark?
HIPAA laws don't let me do that, sorry.
Is he a concealed handgun? Did he have the license?
It's my understanding from ATF that he did have a concealed handgun license.
No, was he using just only the handgun, or was he firing both weapons, or did you know?
Again, I'm not going to get into how many fired rounds from any particular weapon. All those shell casings are being collected. We'll make the association with all the weapons that were used on the scene and determine that at a later date as part of the investigation.
Was he shooting from his car or from the street?
That was asked earlier. He was actually standing just outside his car behind a tree that he was using as cover as he was engaging the police officers.
Captain, can you give us any more on his ethnic background, Hindu, Muslim, anything
I'm-
else that descriptors?
Yeah, let me be clear again. We're not even confirming the identity at this time because of our own procedures and protocols, so I'm not prepared to talk about the suspect here.
You said more than 2,000 rounds of ammunition, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, obviously, talk about the fact that it seems like this guy was prepared to kill or do more harm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
He had that availability at his means, but I'm not going to try to get into his head or talk about anything else. I would rather talk about what we know.
We had heard that he was using some sort of laser pointer. Have you heard anything?
I don't have any confirmation with regards to any lasers at the scene.
And in terms of you said he was wearing a military-style uniform. Was he wearing a bulletproof vest or anything like that?
No body armor.
Okay. And it was an old-style uniform? Or
Yeah, it looked more historic or vintage type military apparel. I don't want to try to guess the insignia, try to guess the nationality. I don't want to, try to venture a guess on that one.
But in terms, it wasn't keeping him safer. It wasn't like there was no bulletproof
No.
or covering of any.
Correct.
It was more for, I guess, just.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult thing for you guys pulling this off?
In responding to the scene?
Yeah.
I think probably one of the more complex, Chief, unless you want to talk about it, I think one of the more complex issues was tending to both the injured citizens who were still in the line of fire while engaging the suspect in live fire and necessarily exposing themselves to that risk, but at the same time moving those citizens to safety.
And the other issue is communication, making sure that we have constant communication with the other agencies that were involved, as well as in containing the incident. And I think the officers, all the officers and the paramedics did a fantastic job in terms of doing that. They were able to get the wounded out, as well as contain him at least to a specific location, which was behind a tree.
Were all the people that were wounded inside their vehicles, or any of them were outside the car?
Yeah, I don't know the exact placement because a lot of them were wounded before we even arrived on the scene, so that will be part of the investigation, their exact placement and whether they're in a vehicle, just outside their vehicle, or whatever the case may be.
To the ATF, do we know if he had, did something get any other weapons in his name besides the two that we spoke about today?
I'm not familiar with.
You don't know?
No.
In terms of being tied to, I heard earlier that terrorism was ruled out, but I just want to confirm that that is the case. You're tied to any extremist groups or anything like that?
The FBI?
Yeah, as of right now, there is no nexus to a terrorism organization or any type of terrorism group, and we work well with Houston Police Department through our Joint Terrorism Task Force.
But is that part of the investigation still ongoing, or
It's still preliminary, but as of right now, there is no nexus to terrorism.
Captain Ray, given the details you all discovered so far, can you give us a sense of how thoughtful this shooter was in his preparation for this attack? Was it something spur of the moment, or did he spend, given what he was at the scene at some time, in developing a plan?
You know, those are all good questions for the suspect, and I'm not going to try to even attempt to answer those on his behalf. All I will tell you is he had thousands of rounds. He had multiple weapons. And I don't know if I've shared that with y'all, but he does have other weapons in his residence. I'm not prepared at this point to discuss how many and all the calibers. That part, we're still working that part of the scene, but there were some there, if that helps answer your question.
I know you touched on this earlier, but just for clarification, there was no shooting inside the plaza there, like inside, like by the
strip
center?
Oh, the strip center?
Like, this all happened in the residential area, or can you clarify?
Did you want to talk about it?
The information we have is that it's going to be restricted to that residential area. As the victims were being shot at, they would drive themselves to various areas of the strip center.
And also to confirm, you said this, but through looking at his background and looking at the calls for service, none to his apartment or to that complex with the person you believe is
Correct.
That's correct.
Any reports of him saying anything or shouting anything before firing?
No. No reports of him even communicating or saying anything.
Could you describe how police were able to neutralize him? How did that whole thing go down? How many people were involved? What happened?
It was a collective effort through the agencies, both Bel Air, West University, and the Houston Police Department, all arriving on the scene at close proximity to each other, using their equipment, be it, because remember this was dark, some using their spotlights to try to illuminate and light up the threat, others taking tactical positions and communicating with each other on their routes and safety and all that, blocking off roads. So really they had a lot to do in a very short period of time.
But in terms of, did he shoot at any officers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he shot at more than
There was
an officer.
engagement.
Yeah,
Sparring.
they exchanged gunfire back and forth.
Can you say how long that lasted before?
No, that will all be a part of the investigation.
You said he was wearing a historical military uniform. I don't recall. Did you describe what color the uniform was?
I would say military green. Yeah.
Was there a sword in his car?
I don't know all the inventory in the car, but if the question is geared towards edged weapons, he did have an edged weapon on him that was still in the sheath on his person.
What is an edged weapon?
Knife, something.
You said, so nine people injured per person?
Yeah.
But he didn't end up hitting any officers, did he?
No officers were shot.
When you said that you have to go through your procedures before you can confirm his identity, how long will that take?
It took a little bit longer here because of all the resources brought to the scene with the bomb squad and making the area safe before we can get the ME in there to work with the body. So I'm not prepared at this time to put a time on that. I will say we will handle that in the normal course of business, but if you check with the public information officers, they'll be able to provide you with something after the meeting.
Did you have information that there might have been a bomb in the car, or was that just a precaution?
Well, with the stuff he had on his person, bulky and other stuff in the car, we didn't want to make any assumptions. We wanted to make sure everything was safe, so we brought the resources to bear for that.
Were there any explosives found or any devices that looked like they...
No.
Is his body still at the scene or has it already been transported to the ambulance?
I don't know. I'll have to get back with you on that one.
Were any police officers' vehicles hit?
None reported to me at this time, but remember, we're still looking for all vehicles that may have sustained a bullet strike that nobody knows about because of where it placed on the vehicle or not being present at the time.
So they were there, very close, while...
Yes, we did have marked patrol vehicles in the area during the exchange of gunfire.
They were in the hot zone, as we call it.
Yeah.
How close is that?
How close is what?
Were they to the firing suspect?
Right there.
Yeah, they were there. I would say, and this is just ballparking it for you, from where the officers were and the suspect were in the exchange of gunfire, I would say about 25 yards. About 25 yards sounds about right. Yeah.
And you said there was a victim who had to be rescued still as the shooter was shooting at officers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Was that a man or woman? Were they in the street? You know, where...
That particular individual was shot while driving the vehicle and came to a stop near one of the officers, and the officers, he held one of the officers down. That officer left cover to take that citizen to safety while the other officers engaged the suspect.
They just focused on the officer and they needed help.
Right.
Did each of the victims get shot in his or her vehicle?
That was asked earlier, and we don't know the placement of all of the victims at the moment they were shot because some of that happened before we got there, but it will be part of the investigation.
Can you talk some about the shelter in place that was issued, if you had any issues in getting that word out to residents, and what you would say to those who would tell us that they weren't notified quickly?
Let me just talk about that. We work with the Office of Emergency Management that sends out that information. We tweeted it, Facebooked it, just about anything, social media I'm not even aware of, that the information was sent out. We got with the media as soon as we can, our PIO office, and on top of that, we were conversing or talking to individuals, the officers were, who were at the location and backing them away. And so that information was out there as quickly as we got there.
Is there an alert system, though, of some kind specifically put in place?
From what I understand, the Office of Emergency Management deals with that, and it does send it out. And they did, because it was actually a huge corridor that was put in place. And then gradually we reduced that until...
We've been talking about what the suspect wore. We've been talking about some other things. Until we can confirm his identity, we won't get into all that other stuff. Okay?
And you have to understand the reason for that is by procedure, the EM, what am I saying? The ME is the one who identifies 100% who the individual is, and so we have to wait for that process because they also are responsible for notifying family and other individuals that have to be notified prior to us going public with the name, and that's the reason.
Chief, can you say some of this in Spanish for our Spanish viewers also?
We can do this
Afterwards. So why don't we just take a couple more questions and then we'll move to the Spanish. Yes.
So what specifically are y'all looking at right now in order to try to determine a motive and, why this happened?
Everything. We're looking at everything. Like I said earlier, we're not closing the door on anything. We have scenes as well as areas that are still being actively processed. We will continue with this investigation to unearth anything and everything that we can, and we won't make any conclusions or anything until we get through with that investigation.
And if I may, and even after the investigation, we have to mitigate all this information. We have to look at this information. We have to ensure that as first responders, not just the Houston Police Department, but all of us, that we're prepared for these type of incidents, because obviously they are occurring. And we have to make sure that public safety is our priority. And again, I cannot emphasize enough to the public, when these incidents do happen, there is training that we provide, but the thing that I ask everybody to do is number one, run away from the active shooter situation. If you cannot, hide from an active shooter situation. And third, if you must, fight. But think through this. Don't freeze. You got to think through this and save yourself.
One last question.
Chief, Captain, I'm sorry. You're looking at the area around the car, his apartment. Can you tell us any other scene that you're...
Well, just downrange. We have a house that was hit through downrange bullet. We've already recovered a bullet behind one couch, on the second story. So until we exhaust all of that search for both physical evidence as well as anything that from videos on businesses like we were talking about earlier and everything, it's going to take a little while.
His place of employment or anything else like that?
We won't leave any stone unturned.